welcome to Valentin Consulting's YouTube channel guest speaker series. And I am Dr. Daisy Valentin, CEO of Valentin Consulting. And I'm so thrilled to have everyone here watching our channel. We have our exclusive guest speaker series, and we have a wonderful guest today as well, as we are here channeling and dedicating and providing high quality insights and discussions around various different topics from entrepreneurs, professionals, and organizations who thrive in today's competitive landscape. So we have a wonderful attorney here straight from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have here Kate. And Kate, we are so excited to have you here. Kate Smith Thompson. We are so grateful that you have come to share a little bit about you and about what you are sharing with our community. So tell us a little bit about you, Kate.
Thank you, Dr. Daisy. It is wonderful to be here with you today. A little bit about myself. I am actually a native of Wisconsin, not Minnesota. Moved here for law school. Been an attorney for about 13 years, and I've had my practice, KST Law, for 3 years. And I focus exclusively on estate planning and probate. And I like to concentrate on what I call law for everyday people, which means anybody who thinks that they can't access the justice system, doesn't understand what estate planning is, or just needs a little bit of a leg up, or maybe thinks they don't have anything. Those are my people. Those are the people I really, really enjoy working with because they do have something and it is worth protecting, and it's worth fighting for if you find yourself in probate court.
That is amazing. And Kate, just to be a very, have a little disclaimer here. We want everybody to know that she is a Minnesota attorney. Okay. So we want to make sure you understand that. So anything that she's talking here is just general education purposes. So I just wanted to throw that out there before anyone asks us any questions that they shouldn't be asking us during our live. Okay. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to come out and just ask you, and you can tell me yay or nay, because I know it has to do with more education than anything. How confident do you see many people in their personal lives, right? Because we're talking about personal financial planning. Like how do you see it in our community where there's a lot of families and or businesses that just are not educated in what you offer?
So I think one of the best things that I can do is partner with other professionals to get that education piece out there. I think a lot of people think estate planning is something you do once when you're older. There's a visual of, grandpa puts his suit on and goes down to the lawyer's office and writes his will, and that's it. And back in the day, that was the way it was. Right now, the main point that I'd like everybody to take away is that estate planning is a lifelong journey. You should start at age 18, and estate planning looks very different at that age than it would at, say, 30 or 50 or 70 or 80. We go through ages and stages, but it is a process and a lifelong journey. I think a lot of people don't really understand that. They think it's a one and done, and it really isn't, because when you're planning for the end of your life, you're planning for something that you don't know when will happen. So Absolutely. The idea is that you should plan for, when I talk to my clients, my planning clients, I usually say they get overwhelmed with the idea of planning something that may affect them 30, 40 years down the road. Mm-hmm. And what I say is that you're going to plan for about the next 10 years, mm-hmm. because that's seeable and doable. And then in the next 10 years, we can plan again. We can look at what you might need to change. You might, your kids are going to grow up. You may not need the same thing from your estate plan should something happen. And certainly our causes of mortality are mm-hmm. different at those different ages and stages. So I think working with other professionals, I think just getting the idea out there that this is not a scary boo. It's not permission to die. It's just good, solid backup plan should something happen. I mean, if you're willing to buy a warranty for your car and you're willing to buy insurance for your house, you should absolutely be willing to sit down and write a list of your last wishes and how your financial life should be wrapped up should something happen to you.
And then the one thing I want to ask about, because it's how can we make estate planning more accessible and common to everyone to conversations? Because I know people get confused about, oh, my living will or a will or estate
Sure.
planning or trust. So how do we get them to kind of understand this? And as you mentioned, it's a process, right? Like things happen in our lives. So those plans change as time changes. Like you
Yeah.
stated, like some people have toddlers or something, and then, 15, 16 years down the road, they want to send their kid to college. Now things have changed, or somebody got married, whatever. So how does it differ from like their living will, estate planning, trust? How does that come together? Like what's the most accessible way to kind of like think about that?
The first thing that I think anybody can do is watch a podcast or a YouTube like this one, right?
Mhm.
Listen to what experts have to say, and there's so much information out there. It can get confusing, and you get a little confused about what applies to you. But knowing the right terms is like the first thing you can do.
Mhm.
The second thing you can do is certainly look into a community education class. I know lots and lots of attorneys who put together free seminars, and not
Mhm.
like through community ed, pay your own way, or through an organization, a church, a community organization, an advocacy organization of some sort, where this is, it's free information and you can go sit for an hour and just listen to somebody. The other thing you can do is contact an attorney. I
Mhm.
offer a free 30-minute consultation, and I'll answer anybody's questions for 30 minutes, just to see what's going on and see what your concerns are, because that's where your estate planning starts. It starts with who are you, what does your life look like, and what do you need to do to protect yourself and your family. Um, and I think from there, you just start listening to what the terms are. What is a will? We don't call we what we used to call a living will. Well, that's now what we call a healthcare directive. And
Mm.
so the terms have gotten a little bit, we've tried to clear up some of those terms. A power of attorney covers business affairs. A healthcare directive covers your healthcare wishes. A trust is a form of estate planning. A will is yet another. They all work together, and sometimes you need one, sometimes you need a few, sometimes you need all of them. It just depends entirely on your own personal situation. So the very best thing you can do is find expert advice to
Find
start.
the expert advice and make sure you're doing the estate planning correctly, so you're not
Correct.
losing anything or missing anything in the interim of doing.
Absolutely. And also the caveat, of course, find somebody who lives in your state.
Exactly.
One of the things that I get a lot. I have out of state clients whose loved ones have passed away here in Minnesota, and we
Uh-huh.
have to do Minnesota probate court. And they say, well, in my state, we do it this way. And I say, I understand that. We're not in your state. We're in Minnesota. So we have to
Exactly.
follow Minnesota law. So even if you have a cousin who's an attorney in Arizona or Texas or wherever, right? That's fantastic. They're going to have some really great general information, and they should be able to explain some things to you. They really shouldn't be giving you legal advice, because it may or may not be applicable. And the differences can be really, 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 really profound.
Exactly. That's we say that too, like in my profession too, like, you're doing accounting in another state or another country, but some things don't apply to one state and the other. I mean, accounting applies to everybody in the US, but some people pay for federal, some people pay federal and state taxes. So when you're doing
Hmm.
payroll and stuff like that, that's kind of like where I see it coming from, and the attorney standpoint too. Like they have rules and regulations that follow through that state, and you need to follow
Absolutely.
that state. And it's kind of interesting that you say that, because many people don't realize that if you do have someone that passes away or it's in the state of Minnesota, you got to abide by the state where they passed in, where they did their will or their estate planning, not where you live.
It's
you
yeah,
know
it has everything to do with it's what we call in legal world. That's
yeah.
what we call jurisdiction, and it's a
Yes.
word that we hear around, but basically what that means is that which court is in charge.
Mhm.
And if you have a loved one who owns property here or passes away here, or was a resident here, this is the rules that would apply. you know. It gets a little complicated when people die elsewhere, but for the most part, those are the rules we follow. And I do have out of state clients who have hired me. They've lived in probably 3 or 4 different states at this point, who have said, so and so died. They owned a house in Minneapolis. I'm like, yep, we're in Minnesota probate court. So, yeah.
And that's where we are. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing. That's why it's great to have a connection here or any state with an
Mhm.
attorney that was familiar with, with the laws, because
Yep.
sometimes they don't know, right? So
Right.
what is something that, when we're talking about legacy, especially legacy, when people are trying to prepare for a legacy, like what's something that professionally or personally or within someone's family that they're thinking about? Does that come into play with estate planning at all?
100%. It absolutely comes into play. Legacy is a huge word, and I think it can mean anything. I once heard, I actually, it can be tangible to intangible, right? It can be
Mhm.
anything. Um, it's certainly legacy can mean money. It can mean your financial assets. But more than that, I once heard somebody say that one of their goals in life was to be a good ancestor. And
Mm,
that just absolutely blew my mind.
that's
I mean,
amazing.
I can take zero credit for that, but it blew my mind to hear someone say, I want to be a good ancestor, because to me that means their legacy is the memories that they leave behind, the knowledge, the idea that they've led a good life, that they've cared enough about how people will remember them when they're gone. And to me, a legacy is just as much about the intangibles and the life you lead and the memories you keep and the stories that you leave behind as it is anything that has to do with business.
I absolutely piggyback off that, because I think it's amazing when people tell you that's amazing. That should be a reason to do estate planning right
Oh,
away.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
That should be
in the world of, in the legal and financial world, you can't leave that behind. But what you can leave behind are good memories. You can leave behind, something to live up to. Again, being a good ancestor, someone who can look at your memory or your diary or photos of you and go, that was a good person.
Yeah, they're not
To
thinking
me,
about you about dollar signs. They're thinking about
no,
like what they
and
learned from you, from their
and
experiences or their professionalism or something.
yeah, and we all know that legacy doesn't attach itself. You're not a good person because you're penniless. You're not a bad person because you're a millionaire. We
Exactly.
have plenty of fantastic people who have great moral compasses and have abundance to share with the world. We have plenty of people who just, aren't really great people and don't have two nickels to rub together. Either way,
Exactly.
I mean, no, seriously, like those things
I
should
agree with you.
absolutely be they should be separated
Yeah.
in someone's mind. But
Yeah.
in terms of estate planning, um, your healthcare directive speaks directly to that, right? What are
Mhm.
you using? Your healthcare directive is a piece of paper that tells somebody how you want to be treated and what your health decisions are when you can't speak for yourself.
Mhm.
So in your lifetime, having that healthcare directive is really important, because even if you have, like, I've said this to a number of people before, even if you don't think you have anything tangible, you have a soul, you have health, you have a life. That in and of itself is worth 5 to 20 minutes to sit down, pick somebody who can be your person, who can speak for you, make some decisions, sign a paper, and get a notary to check it off that it's legal. Because if nothing else, you're protecting yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And you're protecting yourself where, you don't know what's going to happen if you don't have it, right?
That's
You
right.
don't know who's going to be in charge or who the person's going to be doing
Yeah.
anything with. Now, if what do people need other than a legal consultant to get informed, supported? You kind of touched the base on it a little bit,
Yeah.
like watching podcasts and getting acquainted with different organizations or
Mhm.
attorneys that are offering free workshops or education, you know for people that sometimes even with our podcast here, some people don't see it, right? So what would be a good avenue to share people? Is it the library, or like for them to find like resources or something that maybe they're not familiar with their city, state, or
Yeah.
anything like that?
There's lots and lots of stuff out there. You can certainly go to the library and find books. There are places on the internet where you can find do-it-yourself forms. One of my favorite free resources for some forms that are out there is actually the Minnesota State Secretary of State, not the Secretary of State, I'm sorry, the Attorney General's website, the Minnesota AG's website. That's currently Keith Ellison. They have some free forms online. They have a power of attorney form online. They have a healthcare directive form online. They can tell you, you can read what a will is and what constitutes a will. There are certain things that that some people think make a will and they don't. They give what's called intent or testamentary intent, but they may or may not rise to the level of a will. So above all, I would suggest not going at it alone. I know that like finding resources, even if you don't think you have money to hire an attorney, find an attorney who's willing to look at it. There are a couple of legal aid organizations that offer free will clinics. And those are tremendous resources. I've volunteered for them before. But if you want to just get a start and look at what these things are, though, like the Attorney General's website is great. There are some out there you can just Google looking for a form. But before you go filling it out and thinking you're set, find an attorney who can give you an hour of their time, or find a legal resource like Legal Aid or Smurls or MidMin or some of the other legal resources that we have in the state. Justice North is another one. To have an attorney actually look at it and explain to you what that document is, because the worst thing you can do is attempt to be your own attorney and not understand what you're signing.
Not understand the terminology. I tell people when it comes to language of law and language of accounting, I tell people it's like a different language. I always tell them, because I've taught business law accounting, and because it's kind of like at the university. And I'm telling people it's a different language. There's different languages like Spanish, English, French, whatever. Those are different.
Legalese is definitely a language.
It is definitely a different language. And if you're not understanding the terminology, you can get lost. You get lost totally.
I know. So, and one of the things I'll also say is those of us that are attorneys, we are not big, bad, and scary. For the most part, we tend to be pretty collegial. We're people too. We put our pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. I know very few attorneys who wouldn't give a 30-minute consultation or a limited scope, or let you buy an hour of their time to go over some things or to ask for some advice. It's well worth the investment. Or to find a clinic, or to do something where you're actually going to sit down with a lawyer. A lot of financial advisors, they'll offer you software, or like do-it-yourself software. They'll say, "Oh, go on LegalZoom and you can just get that done for $50." It's okay and it's something, but sometimes those documents, if they're not done correctly or properly, they can land you in hot water, or they can have the opposite effect even than what your intent is. And if you can't speak for yourself and there's documentation there, a doctor or an accountant or somebody else who may be helping to deal with your business and your paperwork may not be able to go, "I'm not sure about that."
Exactly. And that's considered like smart legal planning, basically.
Yes.
Smart legal planning.
The fellow who has himself for a lawyer has a fool for a client.
I just feel that there's a lot of different cultures that see estate planning in different ways too. I wanted you to talk about that a little bit too, because I know we only got like about 5 minutes or so, but I think different cultures come across thinking, "Oh, I don't want to do estate planning," because they're thinking about, already my deathbed, right? Like, where am I going to go at the end of the, like they're already preparing me to die. That's my culture has done that, and stuff like that. So sometimes it's really good to hear, like educating them about, hey, this is not about we're preparing you to die. We're preparing you to what's going to come if something happens, The whole point, and I think it would be nice for you to just kind of educate us on that. especially, I mean, you've been in Minnesota. We got all different type of cultures here in Minnesota. We have
Yeah.
a very diverse population here, and I know you've come across it, Kate. So tell us a little bit about how you approach these individuals or educate them to kind of understand, hey, it's not about, this, it's about preparing yourself, like I just said,
Sure.
smart legal planning.
I think the very first thing that's important is to meet people where they are. You know, you don't. It is not, in fact, permission to die to do your will. One of the things I'm very careful about is if I am working with somebody within a culture that I'm unfamiliar with, I'll
Mm-hmm.
stop and before we even sit down. I mean, the fact that they're sitting down with me is progress enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are some people that they just are not, they do not want to talk about it. It's just not a thing. We don't talk about it. We don't do this. One of the things that's really important that I think is universal, beyond meeting someone where they are, asking if there's any kind of cultural sensitivity or any kind of belief or something that that would make them feel more comfortable if we observe or if we're careful about. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I want to talk to them about is, hey, I have every respect for who you are and where you come from, but we are still in the US and we do have laws, and this is what's going to happen if you don't plan appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And very often an emotional appeal works better than a legal one. So sometimes if I sit down, if I have the ability to sit down with somebody and say, okay, the reason I'm sitting with you is because your grandchild or your child or your sibling has said we're concerned and we really want to make sure that all of this hard work and all of this effort um, comes to fruition and we can protect it, because the last thing you want is to have something negative happen or to lose any of that footing and any of that work that you've done. And so the emotional appeal of being prepared and not, you don't have to, and I will finish it and say, hey, you know what, you don't ever have to think about this ever again. That may be it. But again, starting to think about it in a way of being a good ancestor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be a good ancestor
Exactly.
by protecting what you're leaving behind. And if they say, well, it's fine, I don't care, they'll deal with it when I'm gone, I just don't, I can't discuss it. That's not my job specifically. I
Mm-hmm.
end up doing a lot more counseling than I think. A lot of lawyers are sort of armchair therapists, or we end up
I think
listening.
I think
And so
so
people
too.
appreciate, yeah, the people
You
appreciate
just pay
listening.
them to be your high paid therapist.
Yeah, well, but people want to. But you know what? The very best thing I can do to meet someone where they're at is to sit down and listen to their story. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
about yourself. What I make house calls as part of my practice. And when I sit down with someone, the very first thing I do, I put my pen and my notepad aside and I put my folder aside and I sit down and I say, how are you? How are you doing today? Tell me about the people you have in that picture on your wall. Tell me about the cat that's getting ready to, jump over my shoulder. No, talk to me about and talk to me about why I'm here. Like, what motivated you to call me, or how can I know who you are, so that we can express who you are through these documents in whatever way we can, and so that we can take a compassionate approach. Because and
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to that, and there are some things that absolutely 100% I recognize are, either closed practice or there's something that I don't need an explanation for. If someone just says, I don't want to do that, or I really don't, I'm not sure that that's right for me. Okay, we can take a different path as long as it's legal and as long as it's ethical. We will go down this road and follow this journey in your way. And overall, that seems to be what people really, really appreciate, is
And
just
I think that
taking
is
that
amazing that
compassionate
you
approach.
and I think that is amazing that you do that approach because there's not a lot of attorneys that do that.
There's more than I think
We are
but if you
blessed to have you in Minneapolis here,
it's
Minnesota.
it's very easy. It's very easy to, and I fall into this too. It's very easy to fall back on, okay, we're doing a will, we're doing this, we're just going to ask some perfunctory questions. I do need to know about that, but if anyone's feeling at ease, ill at ease, or if there's a hesitation, or I've had situations where I've had a consult before and someone gets real uncomfortable and they get quiet and I say, okay, stop. We're just going to put this away for a second.
Mm-hmm.
what's
'Cause
happening?
it's becoming real to them now.
Yes.
That's what I
And
think,
then the answer is
yeah,
okay, are you okay to go on? Or do we
exactly.
need to, or can we set this aside? Do I need to come back in a couple of weeks? Can we handle some of these things by email? What works for you?
Mhm.
Because taking that approach and centering that person's experience, their life, is really going to help when it comes time to me knowing them enough to do that estate plan in a way that's meaningful, in a way that's compassionate.
And I think that's amazing because we have you here in Minneapolis. I wish you could be in different places, but she's here. So you got to move here if you want her to be part of your circle. But we want to say thank you so much. This was very, very educational for everyone, and for those, like you mentioned, that the culture doesn't allow them to kind of like really see what this is for. And I really like the fact that you take it an extra step to get to know the individuals, even if you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But we want to know, like, for those here in Minneapolis or Minnesota that want to just give you a call or learn more about what you were talking about today, what is something that you can just tell us? First of all, make sure you give us your info here so we can drop it in the chat. But the other thing is, give us a little takeaway. What's something that you tell people, or you tell the community, or you've said that stuck with many individuals in the process?
The very best thing I can tell anybody is that it's all going to be okay. Um, this is not, again, it's not, it's a reassurance. And what I want to tell them is no matter what you're doing something, which is really, really important. And your family will thank you in the end. Um, that's the one thing I can say is that this is a will, and any kind of estate planning, it really is a love letter to your family. So write that love letter because that's what you leave behind after you've gone.
Awesome. I love
Um,
that.
to contact me,
Yep.
you can go to my website, kstlawmn.com, and there's a contact form. Otherwise, my email is Kate, Kate, at kstlawmn.com. And you can find out the rest of my contact information on my website. I will say a phone call may or may not get answered very quickly. An email is the very best way to get me immediately. I've been getting a lot more phone calls. My practice is busy, and I am a solo. And in order to get the correct contact for me, an email is absolutely the best way because I see that a whole lot more often than I would a voicemail or a phone call.
Absolutely. And we want to make sure that they are getting the best version of you, which is doing it
Yes.
preferably where she can
Yes.
contact you right away. We'll put that information here in the chat. But we just want to say thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you for everyone that's watching. And if you want to continue to hear about more speakers, more professionals in our community, locally and globally and nationwide, please like, subscribe, and be part of this channel, because we are here bringing more guest speakers with more thought leaders and bringing collaboration with many here on our platform. So stay tuned for the next guest speaker coming your way soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Dr. Daisy. You too.